mode.
Good afternoon. This is the Database Administration virtual chapter of the PAS organization. Today we're having a lecture on Central Management Server and MultiServer Administration. Our speaker today is Mike Hilwig. He also has a cohort, Andy Malone, who will be assisting, and my name is Julie Bloomquist as the moderator. Our DBA virtual chapter meetings are sponsored by Dell Software. And with Dell's sponsorship, we are able to offer the raffle, which occurs for the attendees. Here's some upcoming SQL Saturdays. These are the July and August ones, both in North America and internationally. SQL Saturday is a one-day mini conference, different tracks with lots of different lectures, and usually the only fees involved are for covering the lunch. So you have an opportunity. You could always go to the SQL Saturday website and see if there's some SQL Saturday coming to your area. If you're planning on attending the PAS Summit 2015, this is really the largest gathering of the SQL Server and BI professional. It's got over 190 technical sessions. There's different tracks. Right now until July 12th, it's $17.95, and if you use the code VC15FPS6, you'll receive a $150 discount code. If our virtual chapter gets 10 people to sign up, we will be able to raffle off one Summit pass. So it's a fantastic conference. If you're into SQL Server, you should consider coming to the SQL Pass. We have a large amount of virtual chapters. If you go to the PAS website and then /VC, you will see a full list of the virtual chapters. And if you associate your PAS login with them, you'll get the emails about the meetings. Most of the PAS chapters do record. This session is being recorded and it will be posted on the DBA-BC archive page. There's many opportunities for volunteering with PAS. And you can always send an email to Volunteer Recognition to nominate someone for an Outstanding Volunteer Award, or to let PAS know, that you're interested in volunteering and what your areas are. Here's the basic information of where all the LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and PAS websites are. So stay involved with your free membership. And today we have Mike Hilwig. Mike's an MVP and a native Pittsburgher, and he's a resident of the Boston suburbs. He's a senior DBA for a provider of a private cloud-based solution for the financial industry. And he's been working with SQL Server since version 7. He's got a background in infrastructure and networking, and his current role in Mike's portfolio of SQL servers grows weekly and sometimes daily. He's quite passionate about automating the administrative tasks. I think we all are, Mike. So I'm going to pass the presentation on over to you. There you go.
Okay, hi. My name is Andy Mallon. I'll be helping Mike out with this presentation today. I'm a senior DBA in the financial services industry, just up the street from Mike. You can follow me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is am2, and you can check out my blog at impatientdba.com. There's actually a blog post tangential to Mike's talk today that I posted earlier this week, if you're interested in checking that out. Mike, as previously mentioned, is a SQL Server DBA. He manages a global team of DBAs for a financial services software company. He's been working with SQL since SQL Server 7 and has worked at companies across a whole bunch of different industries. Mike has been an MVP since October 2014, and coming up at the PASS Summit this October, he'll be presenting his Leadership Without Borders, Working with Offshore Teams presentation. In September, Mike is going to be presenting at SQL Saturday Paris. If you're in the neighborhood, make sure you check out his talk on transaction log internals. Mike has two adorable pugs, Reggie and Ruby. If you ever have met a pug, then you know that those pugs are owners of Mike, and it's not the other way around. Mike does not own his pugs. He's a great cook. I've sampled his cooking. I know that he's not lying there. And he's definitely a geek. He's the type of geek who will install the latest pre-release build of Windows 10 just a couple of days before his presentation because it's too cool to resist. Mike also loves his Bravo reality TV. Keep that in mind because it'll make more sense in a few more slides. And check out Mike at all of the places he lives across the internet. His blog, mikehilwig.com, is very informative. His Twitter is funny, and if you follow him on Instagram, you can see his pugs, his travels, his cooking, his pugs, his backyard renovations, and his pugs. Mike, I think we're ready to start. I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Andy. So I take it that you think I post a lot about my pugs. I don't know where that ever comes from. So hi, everybody. My name is Mike Hilwig, and after Andy said all those nice things about me that I scripted for him, I want to say thank you and welcome you to today's meeting of the PASS Virtual DBA chapter. The one thing I do want to mention is just a couple things. First of all, don't let me talk too fast. If you think that I'm talking too fast, please send a message in the chat window, and Andy will tell me to slow down. I have a blog post written about this already. Go ahead and take a look. You can find that at mikehilwig.com/go/do-more. And finally, I welcome your feedback. I have only given this presentation once before, so if there's something I can do to make this better for future participants, please let me know. You can send me an email. It is mike@mikehilwig.com. One thing I do want to mention, I live on the approach path into Boston's Logan International Airport, and they are currently landing right over my house. So if I suddenly stop talking and you hear this big whoosh sound, that just happens to be a plane landing over my head. So when it happens, you won't be surprised. Now, before I dig into today's topic, one of the things I want to do is, and this is a slide that I put in pretty much every deck for every slide presentation that I give. And I encourage you to really beware of the blogs. The SQL Server community is really incredible at sharing what we know and what we've learned. There is some really great advice out there. Unfortunately, anybody can put bad advice on the internet. And I think sometimes what's worse than bad advice is outdated advice. So a lot of times, advice that you see that was great for SQL 7 doesn't necessarily make sense for SQL 2014 anymore. I mean, we're talking a technology platform that has spanned decades now. So if you see advice, take a minute to measure what was this for. I also think that you should trust people that you know. And I say this lightheartedly, but I want you to assume that I'm an idiot. Assume that I don't know what I'm talking about. Make me prove it. Take what I show you today, test it in your own environment first. Or let me rephrase that. Test that in a test environment first. Don't just find some script you found at Bernard's Blogland that's going to rebuild all your indexes on a 6 terabyte data warehouse and assume that's going to work. that's usually a recipe for disaster. My rule of thumb is that I don't trust people who say you should always do something or you should never do something. The way I look at it is the only time you should never do something is when it comes to auto shrink. Everything else, there's a fringe case for everything. So, and again, test this in your own test environment first. And as I mentioned, you can find the slides and the blog post at mikehilwig.com/go/do-more. Now, this presentation has a little bit of dry information. It can get dry. So I tried to spruce it up with some photos and a few internet memes. Now, I know that animation doesn't always lend itself well to a webcast, but you'll start to get the idea. So, and they might be slightly silly. Let's try that. Yeah, these might be slightly more silly, but I'm going to try to make it at least a little bit interesting for you. And hopefully I won't just leave you bored with all of this. Okay? But if you have a lot of SQL Server instances and a shortcut and how to manage them, this is going to be your lucky day because I'm going to share some information that is that's going to be helpful to you. Andy, I'm going to ask: are the animations coming through, or are you just seeing the still photos?
The animation is coming through a little bit. It's a little choppy, but it's coming through mostly.
Okay. Fortunately, there's not too much animation.
I'm getting just a little bit of interference on. I'm getting just a little bit of interference on your mic, Mike. Just so you know, I might jump in and ask you to repeat something because you've had maybe twice. You've broken up just a little bit.
Okay. And I think it would probably help if I don't speak too quickly either. So let's go on to today's topics. What we're going to talk about today is two features that are built right into SQL Server. They're independent yet complementary technologies. The first one is the SQL's Central Management Server, and the second one is the SQL Agent MultiServer Administration. Now, these two tools, like I say, they're very different and they serve very different purposes. But when you use them together, they make a 1-2 punch. And I use them both very heavily in my own environment. Now, a lot of these things that you do, that I show you today, someone's going to look at these and say, oh, I could do that with PowerShell. Yeah, great. But let's face it, not all of us know PowerShell. And frankly, I manage an environment of about 150 servers today. I have never had a need to write a line of PowerShell. So if I can do this without writing custom code, you'd better believe I'm going to. So the Central Management Server, it is nothing more than a catalog of servers. And what it allows you to do is synchronously query multiple servers. And then the SQL Agent MultiServer Administration, it lets you centralize your SQL Agent jobs. It has a master-target relationship for the SQL Agent. And when I show you this, it's going to be cool. If you've never used these two technologies before, this is good. So let's dig in. Before I do that, Andy, any feedback so far?
I do not have any questions yet.
Okay. So if you do have questions, go ahead and shoot them in the chat window, and Andy will see them, and we will go from there. So let me talk a little bit about my infrastructure. Today I'm using a single VM. The VM's name is Slate, and it has 7 instances on it. Now, normally you wouldn't do this. You would have 7 individual servers, or you would have 7 VMs. I want to stress that these tools do require AD authentication. However, I'm just too lazy to configure a domain controller on my little Surface Pro. It just wasn't worth it. So I'm doing 7 VMs on a single instance. And if you look at my 7 instances, I think you'll see. I think you'll get why these kind of make some sense. Now, I've used a kind of a silly naming convention, but there's a reason I do this. because I'm using characters from the Flintstones, they can be categorized in different ways. I have Fred and Wilma, Barney and Betty, and Pebbles and Bam Bam. So I have adults and children. I have men and women. I have tall and small. I have a bunch of different ways we can categorize this data. And I think that you'll see the reason for that in just a minute. I also have a server or an instance called Bedrock. What you need to understand about my infrastructure is that Bedrock is the foundation of my infrastructure. It is my central server. It runs my CMS. It runs my multi-server administration tools. So when you think about what's the foundation in this environment, it's Bedrock. A little silly, but I think it works in this case. So going into the central management server, like I said, it's just a catalog of servers. It allows you to break your servers into categories, and there's really nothing fancy about this technology. I often joke that this was probably written by some developer in Redmond who needed to pull data out of multiple databases at once and probably did this in about 8 hours. And someone went, hey, that's pretty cool. Let's add that to the product. It's really a great time saver, and it's the tool that you don't appreciate until you really need it. And like I said, it lets you query multiple servers synchronously at once without a line of PowerShell. Now, I know that there are other tools out there that do that. Dell's Toad does this really well. Unfortunately, not everyone's company wants to go out and spend the money on third-party tools. So I'm going to try to make this a little easier with the tools we have. So when would I use the CMS? I've found it works great in these cases. It's great for an audit when I have an auditor who says, get me a list of all of the SQL logins on every server you have. I write one SQL query, and I run it against every server at once. It's great for deployments. Oh, this is fantastic for deployments. If you need to put a new store procedure in your little tools database across every server, this is the way to do it. It's also great for security functions, and I'm going to show you this in a minute. If you need to create a login or disable a login, you can do this across your global organization in a matter of minutes. But really what it comes down to is that anything you need to run on multiple servers at once, this is how you do it. And I'm going to tell you, I use this all the time. So before I go into demo, Andy, any questions so far?
No questions yet.
All right, let's run with it. All right, so can everybody see my, I have SQL Management Studio open. Can you see this?
I can see it.
Okay. So if we go into registered servers, and I have this open, but if you go up and click on View, Registered Servers, it'll give you this panel, and you can expand the database engine, and you can create server groups, but there's something called the central management server. All I would do here is right-click and register a central management server, and all that will do is put a couple rows in MSDB that says, hey, I'm a central management server. Now what? Now, I've already done that, so there's no need to do that today, but I have made Bedrock my CMS. What I have here then is I've registered a bunch of servers. I created a group called All Servers, and all I want to do is I'm going to create a new group or a new registration. And if I say new registration, I can then add my server to a group. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Here I'm going to create a new a new group, and I'm going to call this. I'm going to separate these by, say, age, and then I have my adults, let me try that again. New group. Okay, I'm going to say my children. And by age, I'm also going to say adults. So then under adults, all I have to do is say new registration, and I'm going to say Slate/Fred. And now Fred is listed as an adult, and I'm going to add a registration, and I'm going to do Slate/Pebbles. And you know, Andy, I should probably stop here and say, for those participants who aren't from the U.S., who may not be familiar with the iconic 1960s cartoon of the Flintstones, that's where these characters are coming from. So Fred and Wilma were based on the Honeymooners. It's a comedy. And so if you're not familiar with the Flintstones, definitely check it out, because it's classic Americana. But if you've never heard of the Flintstones before, these references may not be as familiar. And then I'm just going to register Slate/Wilma as well. You see what I'm doing here? I'm just adding these servers to my CMS. Now, great, I have a catalog of servers. What do I do with it? Let's start with a simple query. I'm going to go to my All Servers folder. I'm going to right-click on it and say New Query. And it's taking just a moment to do this, because what SQL Management Studio is doing is it is opening a query session across every one of these servers. So if you look down here across the pink bar, by the way, this bar is normally yellow when you're connected to a server. In this case, it's pink because I'm connecting to multiple servers. You can see that I'm connected to 6 out of my 6 servers. And I'm just going to do something very simple. I'm going to say, hey, SQL Server, what version are you running? So I'm going to do a select at version. And I'm going to execute this query. I can either click on execute or hit F5. And what you'll see is that every one of my servers has responded with what version they're running. So I can see that I have 6 servers, and they all tell me what version they're running. Something to point out here, and I know I mentioned this in a slide a little later. This is in absolutely no particular order. I can run this 6 times and I will get 6 different orders, because the way SQL Server handles this is that it will respond, or it will list the data by order in which the servers have responded. So if I want to do here I go, I'm going to break the rules. I'm going to type in the demo. I'm going to do a select from master.sys.SQL logins. Oh!
That's why you're not supposed to type in demos.
I know, that's why you're not supposed to type in the demos. There we go. So what you can see is that we came Bam Bam responded first, followed by Pebbles, then Barney. It's in no particular order. But and what I think is probably worth seeing here is that it starts with the server name. So it tells you what server returned this row. So if I send a query that I want to see 2 columns, I'm going to get 3. I will always get the server name as the first column as opposed to just the 2 that I asked for. It's just worth keeping in mind. Now, this sounds like a silly little exercise of, oh, show me all of my SQL logins, or show me what version. I can't tell you how many times someone will ask me, oh, how many SQL 2005 instances do we still have? This is a great way to find it. The funny thing about this is you never know what you can use it for until you start using it. Let me give just another example of what I use this for. Let's say I have a new DBA who starts on my team. Now, the right way to handle this would be for them to be to add them to an Active Directory group. Unfortunately, we have far too many organizations that use SQL authentication. I believe we'll never get away from it. So I'm going to create this with SQL authentication. And what I'm going to do is say create my new DBA with password, and of course I give it a password. Now, a lot of times what we do is we will grant our DBAs the sysadmin role. I've heard many people who are much smarter than I am say, you actually don't need the sysadmin role. You can start with control server and it will give you access to almost everything a DBA needs. So keep that in mind. So anyway, I'm going to create this login to every server. Hello, it already exists. I guess I didn't clean up after my last demo. So I have a DBA that exists, but let's say tomorrow that DBA leaves. Guess what we're going to do? We're going to disable her or him. So all I'm going to do is I have a query that says disable that login. And now I have executed that command successfully across 6 servers. Pretty good stuff. Andy, do I have any questions so far?
I don't have any questions. In the event that that's a permission issue on here, Julie, speak up if you're saying questions that I'm not. But I haven't seen any come in.
Okay. So let's. I do want to point out a couple tables that are used in this. And again, I mentioned that this is all this is all just it's a catalog, right? So all of this data lives in MSDB. So there are a couple important tables. There's a sysmanagement shared server groups, and it contains all of those folders I've created. There's also a sysmanagement shared registered servers, and it contains all those servers we've registered. So let me just show you what I'm talking about here. Let's go back to my demo, and instead of running it across my entire server group, I'm just going to create a new query in Bedrock. So now I'm only connected on one server. And if I look at I have to qualify it. So I can see there's a couple out-of-the-box groups that get created, but I have my group called All Servers, and remember I created a group called Age, and then there's Children and Adults. So I can see that Age has a group ID of 21, and then the parent ID for Children and Adults is 21. So you can see how we can start build that nesting relationship. And I don't want to dig too deep into that, but what I do show here is I just have a simple query that, and I'm allowing for 2 levels. So I have a parent and a child, and what you see here is I can see that I have a parent folder called Age, and I have there's Children and Adults, and you can see who is in here. So I can see that Fred and Wilma are adults, and Pebbles is listed as a child. Now, this is all well and good, but if you're in an environment like mine, you don't want to be right-clicking and adding servers every time you build a server. If you have hundreds of servers, you want to automate this. So this is where Microsoft really gives it to us. And this is something I love. There are some procedures here as well. There's an SP sysmanagement add shared server group, and all it does is it adds a group. And then there's a sysmanagement add shared registered server. It allows you to add a server to that group. So let me show you what I'm talking about here. Now I see that I'm going to add Bam Bam. So Bam Bam, it goes into server group 22, right? So all I have to do is I'm going to say my group is 22. and I've now added that server. So if I look under age and I refresh this, I say children, there's Bam Bam. So I just added that server, and I did it with a script as opposed to having to right-click. So if you want to automate this, the tools are definitely there. So just a couple points worth making here. The central management server is just the catalog. All this data lives in MSDB, and you go. The machine where you're running SSMS makes all the connections to each server. So if you have some type of network restriction that prohibits your machine from seeing a server, this may not work. Or actually, no, it just won't work. A lot of times in some environments, we will run SSMS from the management server to make sure that connectivity isn't the issue. If you're in an environment where everything is in your own data center and it's local, you shouldn't have to do that. Couple more points I want to make on the CMS. Older versions of SQL Server did allow you to use SQL Authentication when you registered your servers. You could actually specify a username and password. That is such a bad idea. Just don't do it. Now, newer versions of SQL Server, and I think this started in 2012, it does require AD authentication. So more modern versions of SQL Server do not allow you to use SQL authentications or SQL logins. And as I said before, your statements are going to run synchronously, but you should not expect your results to come back in any specific order. So the order of the results does appear to be based on the order of the statement completion. So here we go, querying 150 instances in a single statement. I can definitely do that. I love a good meme for something like this. So, Julie or Andy, do we see any questions yet?
No questions today. It looks like a quiet group.
No, I have some questions here. I guess you're unable to see them. Is there a way to share a CMS across a whole team? Maybe an export config file?
Oh, great question. So the way this works is that when anyone launches SQL Management Studio on their own machine, they can go to registered servers, right-click on Central Management Server, and register Central Management Server. If your whole team is using the same CMS, whatever happens, whatever I register, you will see, and whatever you register, I will see. So it is a shared, it is definitely a shared environment. And that's why it's so helpful that it's stored in MSDB. There's no configuration file. All of this data lives in about 3 tables in MSDB, and you can absolutely go spelunking through it to see how the data works.
Let's see. Do the servers need to have linked server enabled?
Do they need to have linked servers enabled?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. I work in an environment where we consider linked servers to be a security risk, and we don't allow linked servers. So we do this without linked servers. This is a built-in tool that allows Management Studio to query multiple servers at once. The neat part about this is that the actual management server doesn't do a lot of heavy lifting. All it does is it tells Management Studio wherever you're running it from, it tells it, hey, go query these servers. But the server itself doesn't do any lifting. If we did this all with linked servers, the central server would have to pull all that data back, and that would be a little overwhelming if you're querying hundreds of servers. So no, we don't need to use linked servers.
So I think in this previous demonstration, you showed it that said, can you recommend a way to automate the registration of the servers? Oh,
absolutely. Yes. So what I did here was I called I called a store procedure that adds a registered server, but it is not a linked server. It's a registered server. Those are two very different concepts. So, Julie, can we take one more question, or is that it?
No, just give me a quick minute. I'm looking for a new question. How do you handle a command if it fails on one server but succeeds on the other?
Okay, that's a great question. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop this login that I created. So now I've dropped this login on 6 servers. And what I will do here, so basically I'm gonna simulate that very situation, and I will log into Fred. Oh, that's a little sluggish. There we go. So now I'm going to go onto Fred, and I'm going to create that login again. But if I try to drop this login on any other server, because I just dropped it, it will only work on Fred, but it will fail on everyone else. See, this is what I get for reinstalling VMware after putting Windows 8 back on my machine after having a failed issue with Windows 10. By the way, Windows 10 is very cool. Just don't run it on your Surface yet. It was not a good situation.
And don't install it in the week before your presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Andy.
No problem, Mike. That's what I'm here for.
Okay, so here's what we're going to see, is that this query failed on 5 of my servers, but it actually worked on Fred, because you don't see an error message from Fred. So to answer that question, Julie, is that if it fails on one server and works on another, that's okay. It's not like we're wrapping it in a transaction and they all have to work. You could have success and failure, and they'll be mixed, which actually leads to another thing I want to show. I'm going to just make sure I'm on. Close some windows here. So this is my window, and I'm connected to all 6 servers again. I can just do my select server name, and I can see all of my servers. Now watch what happens when I stop one of my instances. You know, I often joke that when I'm presenting, I can do death by PowerPoint till the cows come home, but that minute that I do demo, it scares me every time, and this is exactly why. PowerPoint I can control. Demos, not so much. Oh, there we go. All right, so I'm going to go to my services window, and I'm going to stop Wilma. Of course, it's going to stop the agent as well. You know, I shouldn't complain about the performance of the server. I'm running 7 instances with only 2 gig of RAM on the VM. That's not terrible. All right, well, that's stopping, and I run this again. Wilma's still up. Oh, that's never a good sign. Okay, now I'm executing, and it's saying, wait. This will take a minute because I have a server that's in a down state. So now what happens is I can still see my results set, but only 5 of my servers responded instead of the 6. So what happens is I can see that I got 1 row back from every one of my servers, except from Wilma, because it says the connection is broken. Wilma's down right now, so I can't query that instance. So just something else to keep in mind. So I think we're running short on time in terms of the 2 topics. So I'm going to bring Wilma back up, and I'm going to move on to the MultiServer Administration tool. This is a server that is, this is a service that is very close to my heart. I feel like Andy and I are the only 2 people who really use this, and it's something that we use very heavily in the shop I work in today. So what I'm going to do is just go back to PowerPoint. All right, so MultiServer Administration. So MultiServer Administration, I think I have my slides out of order. This is an incredibly cool feature of SQL Server. It's incredibly powerful, and I argue that it is the most unsexy technology to come out of Redmond since Microsoft Bob. Now, if you have used Microsoft Bob, that was a long time ago. It wasn't very sexy either. It does have a few quirks. It has some caveats. There's ways to work around them. Once you learn how this thing works, you're going to love this. So I'm going to ask a question for you here. Imagine if you need to update your backup script, and you have to deploy a really minor change across 150 servers at once. Do you really have the time to log into that many servers just to change your backup script? And the answer is no. You don't. You just don't want to do that. And this is what I ran into when I first started in my current company, is that I didn't want to have to manually change ones. And this, but I say there's a better way. The benefit of use, it allows you to keep consistency with your SQL agent jobs across multiple servers. It's a huge time saver when you have to change a script that you regularly run in your environment, such as a backup or your index and statistics maintenance, or when a job gets deployed from the master server, it's locked on the target. It means that job can't be changed on your target. It can only be changed on the master. That enforces consistency. In an environment like mine, where we are running hundreds of instances with the same application, making sure that we do something the same way every time is just really important. Now, I'm going to say it can be a little quirky, and you need to be careful with security here. It's also a complete culture shift. The first time you get a new DBA in your organization and they say, oh, I need to go change that job, and they see that the job is read-only and they can't figure out why they can't change it, it's going to drive them nuts. So it is definitely a culture shift. The other thing is that when you push a job from the master server to its targets, it pushes every one of the job's properties, including the schedules. So be very careful with IO-intensive jobs. The other part of that is that if you have a job that is database specific and that database doesn't exist on a target, you're going to see failures. So I have learned that I run all of my jobs against master or MSDB just in case a certain database doesn't exist. However, what I like about those quirks is that you can still deploy a job without a server. And then you create another job locally that calls SP start job. Now, you're saying, why am I replacing one job with two? The simple fact is it lets you it lets you leverage the consistency of your jobs, but yet you still have the flexibility of a job with a local schedule. So I can talk about this, but it really just needs some demo. Let me get in here. I'm going to close some windows here. Close that. And the first thing you're going to notice is if I look at my SQL agent, you won't see this in your environment today, but I can see that on Bedrock is listed as an MSX. That means Bedrock is my master. But when I look at Fred, I can see that Fred says it's a TSX, or it is a target of Bedrock. That means Bedrock has some control over what Fred does. Let me just pull up Barney as well. Yeah, the universe is definitely telling me that I shouldn't have reinstalled my Surface OS at the last minute. All right, so I can see that Barney is not a target yet. So let's change that. I can do it one of two ways. I can go to Bedrock and say MultiServer Administration. I can add targets. Or I can go to Barney's SQL agent, say MultiServer Administration, and decide, do I want to make this a master or a target? Now, I already have a master on Bedrock, so I'm going to create my master, or I'm going to create Barney as a target. And it's going to give me a wizard, I hope. And I'm just going to walk through this wizard, and I'm going to say, I have to pick my master server. And I want to pick Bedrock as my master. And it'll go through the process of enrolling Barney as a target. And of course, it will create a new login on the master server if needed. What that does is it uses Barney's SQL agent service account, and it will add it as a login on the master server, in this case Bedrock, and grant it as a target with the target server role in MSDB. I don't want to dig too much into that right now, just because we're running a little short on time. And I'm going to enroll. And as long as it said Barney is enlisted, we're good. Now, Andy, was it you who said you've been successful in automating the enrollment? I've never been successful. I always do this with the wizard.
I have had some success with it. I don't know that I would consider it a complete success, but there is a system store procedure that lets you enlist a server as a target.
Okay.
It is possible. It's not necessarily straightforward. The wizard does some extra magic as well.
Okay. There we go. So while that is running, I'm just going to grab the script I need. Wow, this machine is really sluggish today. I just have a really generic backup script here, and all it does is it loops through it loops through master.sys.databases and just does a backup. I guess it would help if I. I think next time I do this, I'm going to do this with an Azure VM, so that I have a few more resources behind it. Wow. Usually in my environment, this happens really quickly.
So here's
there we go. There we go. Now it's done. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my master server, and I'm going to create a job. Now, this is something you don't typically see unless you're on a master server. I have what's my local jobs and my multi-server jobs, and I can create a job in either place on my master server that says, what am I doing here? So in this case, I'm going to create a new master job or a new multi-server job. Wow. Okay. So I'm going to just create a job called backup. And for my first step, and this is just like creating any other SQL agent job. Now, the only difference here is that I have a panel called targets. Because I'm creating a multi-server job, I say this is target multiple servers, and I pick what servers I want to run this from. And I say, okay. And now I have now created a job that I'm going to queue to push down to all of my servers. I hope. Wow. I hate it when this happens. So remember when I said that I love doing PowerPoint because it's something I can control, but with a demo you never know what's going to happen? There we go. So now, if I right-click on MultiServer Administration, I can say Manage My Target Servers. I can see all of my target servers, and it'll show me the number of unread instructions I have. And wow, talk about a great segue. I can see that there are 3 unread instructions, and those are probably, one would be create the job, one is create the step. I'm not sure what the third one would be, but if I give it just a moment, I can then refresh, and I will see that that the instructions, the unread instructions will clear. What happens is that the target servers do it. It will poll every 30 seconds to see, hey, do I have any new instructions? And they will continue to go until there's no more unread instructions. So what I think I'm going to do is take just a minute, and I'm going to go back to PowerPoint, and while I do that, I'm going to reboot this VM. So Julie, while I'm on here, or while I'm waiting, do we have any questions so far?
Well, you were creating the job that went to the multiple target servers. If you change a job that's going to go to those targets, does that automatically get pushed to all the targets that it's assigned to?
Yes, it will get pushed to all of the targets. So that's why I can see I have unread instructions, because those instructions are, if I've changed a job, I've added a job, I've done whatever, that's absolutely what how it will work. And so let me come back to wow. So what I'm gonna start closing some things.
And then, have you seen any issues with having different versions of the MSX and TSX? The wizard seems to show an error, but the server still enrolls. He was talking about the latest that he tested on SQL 2016, MSX registering on 2014 and 2012 with the 2008 TSX.
So in my environment, my master server is actually is running 2008 R2, but in my so I do have higher version targets, but I've not played with it yet. I'm in the process of building up my 2014 master server, so I'm not sure. Now, Andy, you've had experience with that, haven't you?
We have our master server running on 2014, and we have lower version targets, and we haven't had any issues with pushing things out in that direction, where we're going to equal or lower version targets. Our production instances are a mix of 2008 R2 and 2014, and they all work equally well.
Okay, I've heard in the past, anecdotally, of some people having issues with a 2014 with a 2014 management server with some down rev versions. I personally have not seen it though.
So if you push a job to 5 targets, but then re-push it to 3 of them, does it remove it from the 2 that it didn't get pushed to the second time, or how do you get those jobs removed from those 2 targets?
All right, so what you would do is when you push it, it basically creates a link that says when I've deployed this to you, when you will get whatever changes I've made, and any further instructions. Now, what I can do then is I can remove it as a target, and it will, or I can remove a server as a target for a particular job, and that server, and so the target server will no longer get that job. So, but you wouldn't just re-push a job. It becomes kind of a almost like a symbiotic relationship.
Well, do you need to then manually delete the job from the 2 servers that you remove from your target list?
No. If I remove the job from if I the right way to put this, if I go into the job and I uncheck the uncheck the target servers to get that job, it just removes them from that target. It's pretty good at cleaning up after itself. So, okay, while that is finished and coming up, I do want to talk about a couple other things. You don't need to sit in here and watch me reboot. There are a couple notable tables. For those of you who are familiar with MSDB, there's the table called sysjobs, and that is all of the jobs you have defined both locally and on your multi-server jobs. Obviously, in your multi-server administration world, you're going to see more jobs on your master server than you would on your target, because you're probably going to have local jobs on the master server as well. However, there's 2 tables that you're typically not going to see, and that's systarget servers. That shows all of the target servers that you've registered. And then there's also sysjob servers. And that's a one-for-one, or I'm sorry, a one-to-many, and it shows what jobs are deployed to what servers. And there is a stored procedure called SP help target server. And when you run that from the master, it shows the status of all of your jobs. And and I'll show you that here in just a minute. Let me go back to Fred. Oh, actually, I wanted to go to Bedrock. You know, I'm as a DBA, I'm kind of embarrassed that I had to reboot a database server just to make it perform better. That's so not the way it should work. So what you're going to see here is that Fred now has that job called backup that we created a little earlier. Now, what I can do is I can go to this job again, and I'm going back to Bedrock, which is my master server. I can go to this server, and I can go to my targets and say, let's remove Fred. What I'm saying here is that for this job, Fred will no longer have this. Fred will no longer get this job. And in just a matter of about 30 seconds, that job will disappear from Fred, if I did it right. All right, so what you see here, now Barney is still in a blocked state, but Fred now has one unread instruction, which is basically, Fred, go delete that job. You don't need it anymore. All right, so now Fred has no unread instructions. So if I refresh the jobs on Fred, that backup job is gone. So I think, Julie, that hopefully that answered the question of, if I delete the job, do I need to go delete it on the target? The answer is no. The one thing I do want to caution you on, if I go to Bedrock, my master server, and I say start this job, it does not start it on Bedrock. It starts it on every target that this job is deployed to. Now, sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. If you have a job that executes a backup for your server, and you execute your backup job across every server at once, your poor SAN is just going to start kvetching, and that's not necessarily a good thing. So just be careful when you want to start a job. You want to go to the target and start it. Don't start it from the master. Now, what I was mentioning was there is a store procedure. And what did I say that was? It was SP help
SP help target server.
Target sys target servers. And this is why we don't type in demos. And that is an MSDB.
The store procedure is SP help target server without the sys, Mike. You've got yourself all flustered from your machine being...
I see that. All right, there we go. That's better. Okay, so what this is showing me is I can see all of my servers that I have registered, and it just gives me some diagnostic info about the server. It tells me when I enlisted it, the last time it polled, and the number of unread instructions. A status of 1 means it's good. We're in great shape. Status of 5 means it's blocked. What do I mean by blocked? That is simply a case where I'm trying to download some instruction and it didn't work for some reason. So we want to go see why. So if I go back to my master server, MultiServer Administration, and I'm going to manage my target servers, what I can do here is I can go to my download instructions, and I'm going to look at Barney, who is blocked, and I can see all of the instructions that I've sent Barney or that I'm intending to send Barney. Now I can see that this first one, blocking was prevented further downloads because the steps couldn't be read. I think this is because of a, that's a good question, I'm not sure why. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear that blocking. Or sometimes you just have to get a little primal with it and say, you know what, I'm going to delete those instructions, and then I'm going to go back and re-push that job to Barney. This is not the right way to do it. Oh, so I just told Barney to delete a job that he doesn't have, so I may put him in a blocking situation again. All right. Like I said, this process does have a few quirks, but once you get used to it, it's pretty handy. Let me go back here. Let me refresh. All right, so Barney is no longer blocked. He has 2 unread instructions. Let's give him just a second to make sure that it goes okay, and then I'm going to wrap up and then give you folks a chance to ask some questions. There we go. I have no unread instructions. Life is good. So just a couple more notes here. A note on the connectivity here. This is the exact opposite of how the central management server works. So the MultiServer Administration uses connectivity between the servers and not your machine. It takes your machine completely out of the picture here. And the pushing of the SQL agent jobs is done on a regular scheduled polling process. Now, you can do this. You can set your polling interval. The default is 30 seconds. If that is too much or not enough for you, you can change that. But here's something I want to caution you on, and this is on security. Be very careful with security. If you do this wrong, you can set yourself up for some issues. If you have junior DBAs that you don't allow to see every server, you want to make sure that you don't give them access to your master server. Because if they can create a job on the master server that basically creates a login for themselves on a target, and then they deploy it to that target, they've just created themselves a little bit of a backdoor. So be very careful not to do that. The jobs that you run do run inside the target, run inside the context of the target server's service account. So again, it doesn't care if my junior DBA has access to my master and not my target, they're going to get access to the target if they want to. So again, if you have segregation of duties issues, this is definitely where you want to be careful. So that's me talking about this. So my point is, I can now manage all of my SQL agent jobs in one place, and it makes my life a lot easier. So, Julie, let's go back and see what kind of questions we have.
One person was asking if he missed something related to the MSX encrypt channel option. He was able to enable the multi-server administration. He gets an error when trying to enable the encryption, and when the encryption option isn't set.
Oh, yes. So that's something I didn't talk about. Unless you're using certificate-based encryption between your servers, and I don't know that many shops that do. Yeah, when you enable them, there's definitely an issue. So what you have to do is there is a registry key for your servers, and what you do is on the target server, and it's HKey local machine software. Microsoft, SQL Server, and then the name of your instance, SQL Server agent. There is a, where is the key that I have?
The key name, Mike, is MSX encryption channel
right
options.
there. Yes. So what you want to do is you want to change the registry key for, like Andy said, MSX encrypt channel options. Set that value to 0. If you do that, it will allow your servers to talk without encryption, and that is the key for that. It's something we have to do on every one of our servers when we install it. So yeah, great question. And another question, Julie?
Would they be able to configure a job to deploy to the multiple servers that would run under the context of a proxy account, if the proxy account was on all the servers?
You know, I've never tried that. I don't know. Andy, have you tried that?
I've not tried that before.
Guess what we're going to try to do tomorrow?
I know exactly I know what I'm going to try to do now since I'm not being broadcast.
Yeah, that's a question I just can't answer. I don't know.
And can the master also be a target, meaning receiving the same jobs that are being deployed to the targets?
You know, that is that's a great question. Buck Woody, who's kind of a big name in the SQL Server community, says that the difference between a good question and a great question is a good question is one you can answer. A great question is one you have a slide for. So neither the CMS or MultiServer Administration allow your servers to manage themselves. So I cannot put a job on my MSX server to run on myself. So, I mean, I can create a job, but it has to run as a local job, not as a master job. So if I have so basically I have to have a separate backup script just for my local server. So the answer to that question is kind of, but not really. You have to your master server cannot manage itself. And it's kind of a who watches the watcher situation.
And then you mentioned that the jobs, when they get pushed, the schedule is the same on all the servers. Is there a way of possibly scheduling the jobs individually on the target servers, or is it all or nothing?
It is typically all or nothing. What I do, and let me find the, what I do is I deploy the job without a schedule. And then on each of my target servers, I create a job that uses the SOAR procedure SP start job. And that allows us to have the benefit of a centrally managed job with the flexibility of a local. The other way I've been doing this is I will deploy 2 jobs. One, I have my backups. I have a backup job that I run across 150 servers that has no schedule, and then I have a different set of jobs that says run the backup job at 1 a.m. or run it at 2 a.m., run it at 3 a.m. So if I need to move a backup from 1 a.m. to 3 a.m., I just change which job that server gets. It's a little bit of it's a roundabout kind of way of doing it, but we've been pretty successful with it. Any more questions, Julie?
Well, Mike, I think we're kind of out of time. I will save the question log, and you'll be able to review it and then answer individually. I did want to mention today that Daniel Anderson will be getting an email. He's the winner, or she, I think it's a Daniel, whatever, is the winner of the $100 Amazon gift card. Again, I wanted to thank Mike and Andy for the lecture today. One of the only comments I saw was great presentation, but would probably have worked better as two different lectures instead of one. It was a lot to cover in one 1-hour session.
I completely agree.
But thanks again. This session is being recorded, and I will be posting that. It should be up later this week.
All right, thank you so much.